The celebration of Halloween is a relatively foreign concept in Nigerian culture, but many Nigerians are familiar with it and how it is observed. The first time I witnessed Halloween was when I moved to the United States some years ago. Before that, and over the years, I had seen short video clips shared on social media platforms, and more recently on YouTube, discussing Halloween and its origins. Most of these videos had nothing good to say about Halloween. Every October, we see the costumes, the candy, the carved pumpkins, and scary art. These are usually available for sale in Home Depot, Walmart, Safeway, and other stores as early as August or September. For many, Halloween is nothing more than ghosts, costumes, goblins, and great scares. For some others, like many Pentecostals and Protestants who condemn Halloween by tying it to paganism in Celtic festivals like Samhain, viewing it as a celebration that honors evil, the undead, and everything that conflicts with Christianity. For yet others, and many evangelicals and Protestants, it is a satanic holiday that promotes evil spirits, witchcraft, and the occult, and they discourage their members from even doing anything associated with Halloween. While the claims made by many who associate Halloween with evil seem plausible, given the modern-day aesthetics, their claims about the origins are inaccurate. It might be shocking for many Christians to realize that Halloween has more in common with Christianity than with anything satanic. The real story of Halloween begins at the heart of the Catholic Church, with saints in heaven, souls in purgatory, and the eternal truth that death comes for us all. Just like the false claims about Christmas and Easter having origins in pagan practices and beliefs, Halloween is falsely viewed in the same light. This propaganda can be tied to the disdain the Protestant reformers had towards the Catholic teaching of praying for the dead, purgatory, and praying to the saints. And no, it is neither a Christianization of the Roman pagan festival of Mori, nor a Christianization of Samhain and its associated pagan rites. To understand the true origin of Halloween, we must cut through the noise of fallacious accounts and reasoning and delve into the historical roots in Christian tradition. As early as the church began, it was a custom to solemnize the death anniversary of saints who were killed for the faith. The church that was closest to the venue of the martyrdom was where this solemnity was observed. Saints were already being venerated as far back as the 2nd century. By the 4th century, Christians honored the dead and all martyrs together. A feast day commemorating all Christian martyrs existed in the East, with observances held in places such as Antioch and Edessa. By the 5th century, northern Italian churches such as St. Maximus of Turin honored all martyrs annually on the Sunday after Pentecost. By the 7th century, Pope Boniface IV in 615 AD commemorated the dedication of the Pantheon, an ancient temple in Rome, into a Christian church dedicated to the Blessed Virgin Mary and all martyrs on May 13th, establishing an anniversary feast called the Feast of All Martyrs. This marked a formal step in collectively honoring the holy dead. By the 8th century, in 741 AD, Pope Gregory III formally broadened it to include not just the martyrs alone, but all the saints in heaven by dedicating a chapel in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome to them, shifting the feast day to November 1st from May 13th, possibly to align with harvest times or Gaelic traditions to be able to provide food for the pilgrims. Some scholars believe this was intended to replace pagan celebrations that took place during that time of year. By the 9th century, in 835 AD, Pope Gregory IV petitioned Emperor Louis the Pious to declare it a holy day of obligation on November 1st throughout the Frankish Empire with the assent of bishops. This effectively standardized the date church-wide, emphasizing the communion of saints, which is the saints in heaven and souls in purgatory. Allhallows Eve, October 31st, originated as the vigil and preparatory evening preceding All Hallows Day, or All Saints Day, traditionally observed with fasting, prayer, and vespers to honor the saints and remember the deceased. By the 15th century, this observance had been formalized, notably with the introduction of a vigil and octave by Pope Sixtus IV in 1484 AD. However, subsequent liturgical reforms in the 20th century, including those enacted by Pope Pius XII in 1955, led to a simplification of these practices. The Church's commemoration of the dead included the celebration of masses, visits to cemeteries, prayers for souls in purgatory, and the granting of indulgences. These activities often extended into All Saints' Day on November 1st and All Souls' Day on November 2nd. In England, individuals recognized as saints or holy figures are referred to as hallowed, which is the origin of the term for All Hallows' Day. The evening preceding this observance, known as Eve, became commonly referred to as All Hallows' Even, the evening before All Hallows' Day. It was contracted in Scotland to All Hallows' Even, with even being a contraction of evening. The apostrophe was eventually dropped, and it further contracted to Halloween. From the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 962, we believe in the communion of all the faithful of Christ, those who are pilgrims on earth, the dead who are being purified, and the blessed in heaven, all together forming one church. And we believe that in this communion, the merciful love of God and his saints is always attentive to our prayers. Many opponents of Halloween often cite Samhain as the origin of the holiday. However, the idea that Halloween directly derives from the ancient Celtic pagan festival of Samhain, commonly depicted as a dark celebration dedicated to a god of death or involving rituals for the dead, is largely a myth created by speculation and misinformation in the 19th and 20th centuries. In truth, Samhain means summer's end in Gaelic. It referred to a seasonal harvest event around November 1st, typically marked by practical activities such as feasts and bonfires, with no credible evidence of pagan religious rites, gods, or supernatural practices associated with it. This false connection between Samhain and Halloween often traces back to discredited works, such as The Golden Bough, the work of the anthropologist and atheist John Fraser, and later neo-pagan interpretations which media and urban legends have amplified. Ludwig Wittgenstein and Edmund Leach criticized Fraser for distorting evidence, imposing Victorian rationalism on diverse cultures, and creating theories that ignored context. Samhain, marking the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter, traditionally took place on November 1st in the Celtic calendar. Since Celtic days were reckoned to begin at sunset, the celebrations typically commenced on the evening of October 31st, known as Samhain Eve, and extended into November 1st. The festival's date was tied initially to seasonal and agricultural cycles rather than a fixed solar or lunar system. Given this, it is evident that there is no connection between Samhain and All Hallows' Eve, which commemorates the saints and martyrs. It is probably coincidental that they fall on the same date. Now, if Samhain is linked to agricultural cycles and All Hallows' Eve relates to remembering the saints and martyrs, how did costumes, pumpkins, and trick-or-treating become part of the tradition? They have their roots in Samhain. The tradition of wearing costumes on Halloween dates back over 2,000 years to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, celebrated by the Celts in what is now Ireland, the United Kingdom, and northern France. It was believed that the onset of winter blurred the line between the living and the dead, allowing spirits to roam the earth. To avoid recognition or harm from these ghosts and evil spirits, people wore disguises made from animal skins and heads, effectively blending in with supernatural beings. By the Middle Ages, European customs such as souling and guising emerged, involving people dressing in costumes and going door to door to exchange food or money, often in exchange for prayers. Irish and Scottish immigrants introduced this tradition to North America in the 19th century, evolving from intimidating disguises into the more playful and creative masks seen today. The tradition of jack-o'-lanterns is also linked to Samhain and is believed to ward off malevolent ghosts. People carved grotesque faces into turnips, potatoes, or beets and placed embers inside them to create lanterns that will scare away wandering spirits. In the 19th century, Irish and Scottish immigrants introduced the practice to North America during the Great Potato Famine. There, they adapted it to use pumpkins, which were native to the Americas, were more plentiful and easier to carve than turnips. Over time, jack-o'-lanterns became a staple of Halloween decorations in the US, symbolizing the holiday's themes of warding off evil, honoring the dead, and embracing the spooky season. The name originates from the Irish folk tale about a man known as Stingy Jack, or Jack of the Lantern, a miserly drunkard who tricked the devil on multiple occasions. When he died, his sinful ways prevented him from entering heaven, and the devil's anger at being tricked by him caused the devil to deny him entry into hell. Doomed to wander eternally, Jack was given a single ember from hell's flames, which he placed inside a hollowed-out turnip to light his way. Trick-or-treating during Samhain involved people wearing costumes to protect against evil spirits and leaving food offerings to appease them. Some sources believe this practice gradually transformed into early door-to-door customs, where villagers in costume collected these offerings. Irish and Scottish immigrants brought these traditions to North America in the 19th century. However, the modern form of trick-or-treating did not fully emerge until the 1920s and the 1930s in the United States and North America, as efforts intensified to curb Halloween vandalism like pranks and mischief. The phrase trick-or-treat first appeared in print in Canada in 1927 and later spread to the UK and the US by the 1930s. The tradition gained popularity after World War II, driven by suburban growth and the promotion of individually wrapped sweets by candy companies. All Hallows Eve, better known as Halloween, is the day of the Christian tradition of holding a vigil when we look at our interior life and examine how right we are with God and what needs to be fixed as we bear our own end in mind, anticipating that we will join the saints in heaven who we celebrate on the day that follows, All Hallows Day, better known as All Saints Day. On All Saints Day, we look upwards to the church triumphant, our role models who have run the race, persevered until the end, and have now won their crowns. On the day that follows, All Souls Day, we look outwards to those still being purified in purgatory and offer our prayers for them. Some of you might say to yourselves that while all I have stated might be true or false, it is irrelevant to the current reality that Halloween, as it is perceived today, feels more occult and satanic than Christian. Some of you might ask, how can we as Catholics reclaim Halloween? I want to point out that Halloween was and will always remain a Christian holiday, regardless of how anyone chooses to observe it. It is all in the name. This is the same argument I will present regarding the false claim that Christmas and Easter have their origin in paganism. It is in the names too. Celebrating Christ's Mass, commemorating Christ's birth, cannot possibly have anything pagan associated with it, because it is the celebration of when the light came into the world and the darkness was dispelled. To insist that Christmas is pagan is an oxymoron originating from ignorance of who Christ is. In the same way, suggesting that the Christian celebration of the resurrection of Christ, when the light defeated darkness, is pagan is another oxymoron originating from ignorance. In the same way, to insist that the eve of the day of the hallowed, when the saints overcame the darkness and were born into the light, is synonymous with evil, is another oxymoron born in ignorance. A day cannot be holy and evil at the same time. It cannot be considered evil every time the light dispels darkness. That is backward reasoning. The Lord blesses human beings with good gifts. Some use their gifts for good, while others use them for evil. Why will people insist that those gifts are suddenly evil because there are people who use them for that purpose, while ignoring all the good that has been done with the same gifts? This is because the ignorant are cheering for evil over good and have refused to come to that realization. So on the evening of October 31st, while some dressed like demons, criminals of the world, old and new, and witches, warlocks, ghouls, and vampires to associate with evil, dressed like saints, priests, nuns, angels, any of the prophets or people in the world who are good role models and are associated with the hallowed. Take your children trick-or-treating in their costumes and let it be an opportunity to teach them to be grateful for every gift, in this case, the candy they receive. Let them be thankful for the gift of life, and even when tricked, let them be thankful for God's sustenance of their lives, even when life knocks them down, tricks them, and roughens them up. Teach them to pray for those who graciously hand them treats, since the prayers of little children are strong enough to silence God's enemies. Now, I understand that some might be living in communities where those who practice Wicca, who are into witchcraft and Satanism, may be living. If you live in such communities, do not let your kids go out, so that they will not have to receive anything from such people, as most of what they possess might be cursed. Light your jack-o'-lantern, and you can decide to either view it as being associated with the devil because the ember is a flame from hell to light the way of the drunkard, damned to wander around. Or it could be more practical by first remembering that this is folklore. Secondly, we are wanderers on this earth, like the Israelites who fled Egypt, trying to stay in line with God's requirements, with our lights that should never go dim, like the 10 foolish virgins whose oil ran out. Fire was not created by the devil, but by God, and it is the hallowed fire of the Holy Spirit that enlightens us in the truths that comes from God. So light your candles, pray for the souls in purgatory, and shine the light of Christ. You must magnify God even in the darkness, rather than bury your head in the ground, like the one with the 1 talent buried his talent and yielded nothing. If you don't shine Christ's light, then you are permitting the darkness to rule your surroundings. For God did not give us a spirit of timidity or cowardice or fear, but the spirit of power and love and sound judgment. Therefore, on October 31st, as darkness falls, light a candle, whisper a prayer for a departed soul, and remember, Halloween is not the devil's night. It is All Hallows Eve, the night of the vigil that leads to the day when we commemorate the triumph of the saints who won the battle over darkness. And we must also. Memento Mori. Remember death, not as darkness, but as dawn. Awaken, repent, return to life, eyes raised towards eternity. That is the sacred message behind Halloween.